Okay, today's featured author, Ellen Meister, will be introduced and interviewed by Saralee Rosenberg.
Hello.
A few months ago, many of you had the pleasure of watching Ellen give a wonderful presentation on Dorothy Parker. And it actually was our most watched, most viewed webinar of 2020 on our YouTube channel. And if you missed that webinar or any of our previous author webinars, you can watch them on our TTN NYC YouTube channel. Let me tell you a little bit about today's interviewer. Saralee Rosenberg is the author of 3 nonfiction books and 4 novels from Avon HarperCollins. She's also a nationally known public speaker and freelance writing instructor. She is at work on her first novel for middle grade readers and has been a proud colleague of Ellen Meister since 2008 when they teamed up for a book tour. And I remember that book tour very well. So Saralee, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you for coordinating this event as an author. And I know Ellen feels the same way. We love to connect with readers, even if they can't speak back to us right now, but that hopefully will change one day soon. But I am honored to also be here to celebrate my friend and colleague, Ellen Meister, on her new book, Love Sold Actually. And as Debbie said, we've known each other for many, many years. And I think she would agree if I said that we were both our biggest champions and our biggest critics. When we read each other's work, we really hold our breath because there is no holding back. Right, Ellen?
Yeah. It's true. We're not just friends, we're beta readers.
Yes, and that sometimes that's really hard. But praise from Ellen for me, you know, just that means that the chocolate chip cookies are safe for a few more minutes. But anyway, I would like to tell you about Ellen if you're not familiar with her. And when I wrote this introduction, I could actually hear the music to the dating game, the theme song in the background, da 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 da, which that dated me. But Ellen is the author of 6 exciting novels that take readers on a ride. Her career began with a suburban romp called The Secret Confessions of the Applewood PTA, which was published by Avon Books, which is HarperCollins. And that was followed by The Smart One, about 3 sisters who fight until they discover a long dead body and hope it's no one they knew. In The Other Life, readers delve into a riveting story about returning to the roads not taken and why. From there, Ellen took a sharp left, because if you know Ellen, everything leans left with her. And she wrote 2 completely inventive novels, borrowing from the mindset of the incomparable Dorothy Parker. And if you haven't yet read Farewell, Dorothy Parker or Dorothy Parker Drank Here, you are missing a rare treat in fiction. Both stories are grippingly funny and historically fascinating. Now from there, Ellen took another left and published Love Sold Separately. She thought this first book in the Dana Barry series would be promoted as a murder mystery because, well, there's a murder and there's a mystery. But instead, the publisher billed it as a rom-com. Now her latest novel, which I know you will love, is called The Rooftop Party, and that's coming out in May. And that is the second in the Dana Barry series. And it is full of romance and intrigue and a very deserving man who deserves to be shoved to his death. If only Dana could figure out if she was the one who pushed him. Now, in her spare time, Ellen is also a novel and a creative writing instructor. She's a private editorial consultant for emerging writers. So as you can tell, grass does not grow under this woman's feet. You may also notice that her career has taken many twists and turns. You could even say she is the queen of transitions. So Ellen, since life's transitions are something that are of interest to all of us, I'd like to start by sharing a quote from a New York Times story that ran last week. It featured the novelist Kristen Hanna, and it was about the many ways that, like you, she also had to reinvent herself with her books. She went from writing mass market romance to hardcover book clubs to historical sagas. Now, in your experience as a writer, what do you know about genre jumping that you didn't know before you started? And has it been exhilarating, or did it fill you with dread?
Oh, what a great question. So first of all, thank you so much. That introduction was everything.
Thank
And
you.
Debbie, thank you for inviting the two of us. And it's so much fun to be doing this with my very dear friend, Saralee. So this is great. Um, yeah, genre jumping was, a very, very interesting journey for me. I never, despite the fact that, yes, my second book did have a dead body in it, that was not a murder mystery. Why? Because I'm not a mystery writer. And at the time, I had no idea how to write a mystery. And when I was starting this book, I had absolutely no intention of writing a murder mystery. And Saralee, I know you know that the way stories come to us, it can be very circuitous. And sometimes it comes to us in little bits and pieces, and we never really know where an idea is going to come from. So the idea for Love Sold Separately, which incidentally, I was originally calling Kitty Kitty Bang Bang,
Right, I
because
remember.
the character that gets, the bullet was named Kitty Todd. So that idea did not start out as a mystery. And why would it? Like I said, I'm not a mystery writer. It started out as just an idea for a character. And, I'm always telling, people that ask about, what it's like to be a writer and how do you get your ideas. And my writing students agree with this. Writers, especially fiction writers, we're collectors, right? So we collect things from the outside world, little
Mhm.
things that we perceive, little interesting bits, just to gather them and see if they would belong, just to add details and verisimilitude to a scene. But we also gather what's in the interior, right? So I think everybody has crazy thoughts and ideas that flash through their mind a million times a day. But as writers, we're trained to sort of stop and look at them and inspect them and decide whether or not they're a story. So that said, I'm the type of person that sort of needs a little bit of noise to fall asleep at night. I tend to
Mhm.
turn the TV on. I try to find something sort of mindless that won't keep me up so that I could fall off to sleep. And I very often would tune into those shopping channels, QVC or HSN. And, I was watching it one day and I was thinking, like, wondering if these women were as pristine as they looked. They struck me as such perfect women. They presented themselves perfectly. They were poised. They were just funny enough and not too funny. They were gorgeous. They were perfectly made up. Their clothes were pristine. And they seemed to me to be people who were perfect in every possible way. And I just had this funny thought. What if I took somebody who was an absolute wreck? The kind of like young woman who, woke up and lit up a joint and slept half the afternoon away and had a
Right.
tendency to self-sabotage herself. What if I took that type of woman, and we've all known people like that, like old college buddies, right? And put her in that situation. And it amused me, the thought of it. I said, well, that could be really interesting in terms of the character, in terms of the drama, but that wasn't a book. And I was working on other things, and the idea just sort of stayed in my brain.
Right.
And then one day it occurred to me, and honestly, and I always say I'm not the type of person that has the muse fly in their window and offer them ideas. I work very hard at my ideas. But this particular time, I got a visit from my muse. And my muse said, a murder at the shopping channel. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. You have the wrong house.
Right.
Maybe you're looking for Susan Isaacs. I don't write murder mysteries. I don't know how to write murder mysteries. I've never written a murder mystery, but the idea wouldn't leave me alone. So at that point I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So then I had to teach myself how to write a murder mystery, which included reading articles about how to write a murder
Right.
mystery, going back and rereading a bunch of mysteries and, deconstructing what made them work. And once I finally thought I had it cracked, I started writing it, and I didn't stop until I was done.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Was there ever a point in this process, and that muse who you thought stopped by your house, you could send them to mine, if they're willing to travel to Suffolk County. Was there ever a point at which the idea came to you where you said to yourself, oh, this is so stupid. Nobody's ever going to believe that I could write this. I don't even think I can write this. My publisher, my agent, who they're not going to take this from me. This is so different than what I've written before. So did you have the other side of the muse talking to you at the same time?
Yes, completely. I said, Ellen Meister, as a writer, you're almost like a brand. And I thought, nobody's going to accept a murder mystery from me.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a persona. I'm going to write it under a pseudonym.
Right.
So I invented this other writer who writes murder mysteries. And it was really interesting because I thought of myself almost like an actor, playing a role, like a method actor. I almost became this other author writing this book, and it was very freeing because I said, nobody is going to know Ellen Meister wrote this book. I'm somebody else. I'm another persona. I'm going to publish it under a pseudonym. And so I wrote the whole thing as this other persona.
Hmm.
And then what wound up happening, and I finished the book, and my agent loved it, and we both found out something really interesting about the mystery genre when she tried to sell it to publishers, which is that there are very specific lanes you can fit in the mystery genre. You could be writing a detective story, you can be writing true crime, you could be writing a thriller, and you could be writing what's called a cozy mystery. And just as I actually thought I wrote a cozy mystery because my understanding is a cozy mystery is a story with an amateur sleuth,
Okay.
and usually an amateur woman sleuth. Well, it turns out a cozy is something more specific than that. A cozy does have an amateur sleuth solving it. However, as a genre, it always takes place in a small town.
Wow.
It's completely G-rated, and which my book is absolutely not completely G-rated. There's curse
And New York
words,
City, I don't know if that's a small
New York
town.
City, right?
Yeah.
And there's drugs and there's sex, so it didn't fit. And also, there's always something very domestic at the core. Like either there's a knitting club or baking or something. So it wasn't a cozy. So when she started to send it out to publishers, we got the most heartbreaking rejections. When I said heartbreaking, it was because the editors kept saying they loved it, but the marketing departments wouldn't let them buy it because they didn't know how to sell it because it didn't have a place on the mystery shelf.
Wow.
So thank goodness for Mira, my current publisher, because they had the vision to say, it's true, it doesn't really have a place on the mystery shelf, but we think we can sell this as a rom-com in the women's fiction category, a story that's, deals with this romance and this character and, this great fun setting of the shopping channel that just happens to have a mystery in it. So that was how I went. And at that point they said, and since it's not a mystery, we would like very much for it to be written by Ellen Meister because you have readers and you have an online presence.
Right,
so
right.
I came full circle and I became me again before the book was actually published.
I'm really glad about that. I was always supportive of you being Ellen Meister and being able to genre jump. But I want to bring this back to the whole idea of reinvention, because all of us at this age and transitioning into different lifestyles, and personally and professionally, is resilience and reinventing yourself something that you were always good at, or you had to skill build? And what did you know about this process that might be of interest to people who are making transitions, not writing a book, but just, in life?
I think it all comes down to how badly you want something. And it was the burning desire. I didn't think of myself as particularly resilient. But after I wrote my first book and I had such a strong desire to see it traditionally published, just walk into a bookstore and see my name on a bookshelf, that I was willing to endure almost anything. And as a writer starting out, and as you know, my first book came out in 2006, so maybe this was like 2003 that I was like going through all this, trying to get an agent, finishing up the first book. I didn't really know how much of that I had in me. But that burning desire took over, and I was able to endure the rejections. And as you know, Saralee, there is almost nothing that requires endurance like the waiting that a writer has to do.
Right.
It's patience, 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 patience. All you do is wind up waiting. And, it's almost more difficult these days when the call of self-publishing is so alluring. It's so easy, within minutes you can have a published book, and that's fine. It just wasn't what I wasn't my goal in life. I really wanted to be traditionally published. So yeah, I did find resilience. And I do remember reading a book from an agent who was writing about, this process. And she said that the difference between the writers she sees that make it and the writers that don't, she says it has more to do with perseverance and resilience than with talent.
Right. The ones who never quit.
The ones who never quit.
Well, I think that's a really, really intriguing point about resilience, about motivation, about desire. If you want something bad enough, you'll figure it out. And, yes, there are going to be setbacks, and yes, there's going to be rejections, and they all hurt. They, for anyone who doesn't think that that part of it grows, or that we ever get accustomed to that, it's not true. Rejection here hurts no matter how long you've been doing this.
Always.
So I applaud your courage to persevere with it, and the book is delightful. I have my signed copy and my matching beautiful bookmark. So, all right, I'm going to move on to talk about Love Sold Separately specifically. And for those who have not seen it or read it, it got great reviews from both Candace Bushnell, the none other than the creator of Sex and the City, and our own Long Island beloved best-selling novelist Susan Isaac. It came out in August, and the story is so clever and charming. But one of the things that I really enjoyed was the imperfect narrator, Dana Barry. And as Ellen alluded to, she was, well, when we first meet her, she's a lovable loser. But she's wickedly smart. She's incredibly resourceful. And readers will immediately root for her because she's so damn funny. Especially after she gets hired to be a host on the shopping channel on the very day that their diva host, Kitty Todd, is found dead. Now, you told us a little bit about how you came up with the idea of using the shopping channel as a backdrop, which is great. But I also understand that you went to QVC for a day. You took a little field trip out in Pennsylvania where they're headquartered. You got a chance to have lunch with your daughter, Brooke, who was at Swarthmore at the time. So it was a record day, but I'm sure that everybody would love to hear what it was like to see it in the flesh, to feel it, to smell it. What can you tell us about that experience?
So I was already pretty deep into writing the book when I said, QVC is not that far. It's a day's drive. There's no reason why I can't go there and take a tour and see what it's about. So I went on the website to check out the tours, and there are, different gradations of tours that they have. So there's this top tier tour. I call it the Cadillac tour. It's very expensive. It's $100 to take this tour. Yes, it's like going to Disneyland. But, it's a very small tour. It's just a few people, and you really get to go backstage and see how the sausage is made, and you actually get to meet the personalities. So I said, okay, I'm going to take the tour. Now, but here was the thing, Saralee, in keeping with that whole idea of having to sort of disguise my identity, I didn't want to let on that I was an author who was going on this tour for research, because I didn't know how proprietary they might be about what's going on there. I thought they might say, no, sorry, you can't come in.
Right.
So I had to pretend I was a super fan. And QVC super fans are a breed unto themselves. Listen, I'm not going to say I'm not a fan of QVC. I've bought from QVC. I bought from HSN. But these folks, imagine being such a fan that you're willing to spend and not write it off as a business expense, $100 for this tour.
Right.
So there were people on this tour who drove from Kansas to Pennsylvania just to go on this tour. There was a couple who drove from Kansas, and it was their second time doing it. They loved it so much. They made the trip again, spent the $200 for the two of them. I'm telling you, QVC for some people is like Disneyland. So it was really interesting to go backstage and see what I got right and what I got wrong. I probably got more right than wrong, but it wasn't really so much about getting things right as just finding details that would add, layers of authenticity to the story. And what was interesting was that I really didn't watch the program the channel enough to know the different personalities, but some of them came out to greet us, and they were like, you people, you're our biggest fans, and we couldn't do this because of you. And I had to pretend I,
Right.
was in awe and knew who they were. And, because all these people were fawning and I fawned too. So it was just kind of a funny experience to meet them. But I'm really, really glad I did it. And I'll tell you this. If I wasn't a fan going in, I was a convert by the time I left.
Wow.
Because they went through so many details about their quality control that I left. And to this day, I really believe that if you order something, they live and die by quality. And, so I'm very confident when I order something from there that I'm going to get something that's been through the ringer. They test the heck out of everything they sell.
That's great.
So,
I was going to ask also, for research purposes only, what could you not resist? What have you bought from them?
Oh, a couple of things. Handbag. I have this great faux fur winter coat that I get compliments on everywhere.
Aww.
And because I sometimes click into it, I do get the ads pop up in my Facebook feed when there's a sale. So I just bought a really adorable set of coffee mugs.
All right. So you are a convert.
I try not to spend that much money, but yes, I do succumb once in a while.
Okay. Well, that's great. The other interesting aspect of the story is Dana, the main character, your hero. She seems to be pretty relationship challenged. There's some serious sibling rivalry with her younger sister. She can't get her father to respect her. She pisses off her bosses, argues with her manager, her best friend. She struggles with romantic relationships because she sometimes forgets she's in one. So how did you give birth to this very flawed protagonist? And what was the most surprising thing that you learned from her?
I wanted to make sure, it was really important for me for Dana to be really flawed. I wanted a character who had a habit of self-sabotaging. Why? Because a story isn't interesting if a character is perfect. So this character had a lot to overcome because here she was, I set up this scenario where this woman gets this dream job, right? And everything is coming true for her. So I had to create a character who had a habit of screwing things up even when they were absolutely perfect. It was very important for me. What I did was when I created this character, I said, a really interesting characteristic that she would have is that she's somebody who notices things on a molecular level. Why? Mm-hmm. Because that is almost like a Sherlock Holmesian quality and would make her really good at solving mysteries. At the same time, it would also make her a really good shopping channel host. Right. Why? Because if you have to, spend 45 minutes, describing a pair of hoop earrings, you really have to notice things that the rest of us wouldn't notice. So I gave her this interesting quality. What I hadn't counted on was how her skills as an actor would serve her well in this role, mm-hmm. both as a sleuth and as a shopping channel host. Right. So that was something that really interested me as I wrote the story. It's like, oh, so as an actor, she has to sort of get into the head of the character she's playing. And if she also gets into the head of who might be the murderer, that will also help her solve things. So that really surprised me as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned, there's the love interest in the story, and that's why it's called rom-com. But it happens that the love interest in the story is Detective Ari Marks, who is, well, as I called him, arresting. What made you want Dana to fall in love with a smoking hot man who could potentially take her into custody for murder? And was it difficult to give her a happy ending?
I wanted somebody who challenged her and challenged her type, because there is a bad boy who she's attracted to at the network and at the shopping channel. And Ari ostensibly is the opposite of a bad boy, right? He's the guy with the rules. So I wanted to really challenge her so that she would have to have a character arc to come to the point where she realized that this was the right guy for her. Okay. I also wanted to create a character that I could have a little crush on, because then it makes it a little more fun to write, So he was like tall, dark, and smoldering and smart and gave her a run for her money. it was a fun way to, create the romance. And yes, it was challenging to have her come to the point where she could have a happy ending with him. But it's an escapist book.
Right.
And I wanted to
That it
deliver
is.
her. Yeah, I wanted to deliver her in a good place. So I wanted to do two things by the ending. I wanted to solve the murder. I wanted it to surprise the reader. And so far, I have not met anybody who said they were able to guess who the murderer was before they got to the end. So I felt very proud of that. So I wanted to be able to, create enough red herrings and have the reveal be a surprise. But I also wanted to deliver the reader to a really, happy destination in terms of Dana, let her have an arc, in terms of all the different aspects of her life. I don't want to give any spoilers, but yeah.
That's great. We could compare them now to you were ahead of the game with Bridgerton. We have our own Simon and Daphne. For those of you who have watched it, Detective Ari is as you describe him, is just, he's hot.
Yeah,
he just is. So, and and of course it makes you root for Dana not to mess this up as she has everything else. And so that's also, part of the ride, and part of why readers will stay with it to the very end is, to find out, do they end up together, and what's that about? And nothing is ever as it seems in Ellen's books. You think you know where it's going, even when they're not murder mysteries. But that's the fun of the ride and the journey, is that she really keeps you guessing until the very last page. And you did that with this as well. So I would like to talk about your new book coming out in May, The Rooftop Party. I understand you have the advanced review copy with you, so you can show off.
Yeah. So I know, I know you showed People Love So separately. So this is the one this is out now. And The Rooftop Party doesn't come out until May. And I know this looks like a book. This is actually not a book. In the publishing business, we call this an advanced review copy, or bound galleys. I know you know what that is, Saralee, but so it's an uncorrected proof, believe it or not. And I'm not telling you, I'm telling the folks watching. They actually, for reviewers, they print and bind these things before they're proofread. So they're rife with errors, which is why if you see writers throwing a fit that reviewers wind up selling these on eBay, that's why. We want to put our best foot forward. We don't want the general public reading these things that are filled with typos. But I was very excited that my publisher actually wanted me to keep Dana alive and keep her going,
right,
and give her another chance to strut her stuff. And I had a lot of fun writing this.
I had a lot of fun reading it. I was one of the lucky people. I did not sell it on eBay, but I was one of the lucky people to read it in advance. And it continues the saga of Dana Barry and Detective Ari Marks, who she's now involved with. And there is another murder. And this one goes off in a very, very different direction, but it's still so much fun. It's great escape. And I know when it comes out in May, it'll do really, really well.
Yeah, this one was a little bit on the cathartic side to write, because well, I should say I continue to explore the relationship. Like, Ari is still in it, her relationship with her sister, which, by the way, was really fun for me. I kind of modeled their relationship on the relationship between my two younger kids, which was kind of fun. But when I was writing this, and I needed I needed a victim, and this isn't really a spoiler, because the murder always happens close to the front of the book, so it's not really a spoiler. But I created a guy that is like every sort of Me Too nightmare. He's sort of a cross between Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein. And I don't want to get political, but a couple of other people that are quite unsavory to me mixed in. And then I push him off the roof. So, and so that was, me having a little fun. But I think readers are going to enjoy it. And then
yes,
Dana has to figure out who did it. And of course, she doesn't even know if she might be the one who did it. So.
Okay. That sounds great. I know readers are going to love it. And I said that it wasn't the shove and the push that killed this man. It was the sudden stop.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
he definitely has it coming. So
Yeah.
you alluded once before to a dead body appearing in The Other Life. No, I'm sorry, The Smart One.
Yeah.
And but dead bodies seem to show up in almost all your novels.
Do they? I
Yes,
must be a little bit macabre in my
you know,
subconscious.
but I understand, you know, when readers tell us things about our books, and you know, our first you know, tendency is to question that, like, they can't be right. Somebody once
Yeah.
told me that there was a character Roberta in all 4 of my novels, and I was like, no. And then
And
there was.
That's
So
funny.
in your books, you know,
Yeah.
there are a lot of dead bodies. And so tell me what you know, what you think, what is it about a dead body that adds to the story more than the living people? Not more, but
I think it's just, when there's a mysterious death, there's something you need to find out, right? And there's something that just sort of adds to the engine of driving the story forward. And it's funny you say that about readers coming to you and telling you what your books are about. I had somebody say to me once, do you realize that at the heart of all of your novels is the relationship between women? And I said,
true.
no, but now that you mention it,
Right.
yes, my first book was a friendship story. My second book was
About
a
sisters.
sister story. My third book had this, intense mother-daughter thing at the very, very heart of it in The Other Life. And then, of course, I had 2 characters who have these challenging relationship, 2 women characters in my Dorothy Parker books who had these
Right.
challenging relationships with Dorothy Parker. And then in these Dana Barry books, there's her relationship with her best friend, Megan, who doubles as her manager, her relationship with her sister, and then there's a difficult boss in it as well, who's a woman. So yeah, it's just, feel free to psychoanalyze me. I don't know what I'm working out in these books, but I think that, maybe it's because women are so complicated in our relationships with one another. And it's just really interesting for me to probe that and explore it and pick at it and pick at it and pick at it, because no matter how much you pick at it, there's just more layers and interesting things to uncover.
So what do you know about female relationships, friendships, mother, daughter, sisters? What do you know about the human dynamic of those relationships that you might not have been aware of before you started writing?
I guess it's just, the endless depth and interest in it. I could never get bored with it, and once this friend pointed out to me that that's what I write about, I realized that those are the books I'm most drawn to. Not necessarily even books that explore the relationships between women, but any books that explore human relationships in a new and fresh way with new and fresh insights. To me, I don't think there's anything more interesting than that.
Right.
So if it's interesting to me as a reader, it's going to be interesting to me as a writer.
Exactly.
And maybe when I start out, I don't know what it is about the relationship between Dana and her boss and Dana and her sister and Dana and her best friend that's so intriguing. But I like to put them in a room together. I know who they are, and then they speak to me and I can see what happens and probe the relationship.
That's great. Well, that's why the books are not only so fun, they're engaging and enlightening, and they're mirrors. You are holding up a mirror to all of us, and for us to reflect and to look and say, that feels familiar to me. I mean, that's the joy of writing fiction, as you know. It's not that that a reader will have been able to relate specifically to the events in the book, but they do relate to the feelings and the emotions and the longing and the anger and aggravation sometimes, and you bring that home.
And that's so important to me, Saralee, because I think that one of the things that makes a novel a rich experience is the emotional truths that it probes. Sometimes people ask me, which character in this is you, or how much of this is true? And the fact is, everything that I write is fiction, but I do like to explore my own emotional truths.
Right.
So if
Absolutely.
I have a feeling about a thing or a person, I like to create a fictional version of the events, completely fictional, maybe very, very far from what I've actually experienced, but probe the emotional reality of it, the emotional depth of that. And that's what I think resonates with readers. And I have had readers come to me and say, well, I know your mother must be like this and your father must be like that, because that's how my parents are, and that felt so true to me. And then I have to break it to them that it's not really my life.
Right.
But the fact that if it feels good and authentic to them, then I feel like it's satisfying. I feel like I've done something right.
Well, without knowing it, you have just helped me transition to the last part of the Q&A before we take questions. And in all fairness, full disclosure, Ellen and I did talk, of course, before this to talk about what subjects were of interest to her, what she thought would be of interest to you. But I'm going to surprise you. This is the lightning round. And I have taken some quotes from other wonderful writers, novelists, and I'm going to see how Ellen feels about these same statements. So the first one is from Alice Hoffman, who I know you know. She says, "I don't decide on the narrative point of view. The book comes with its own point of view." True or false?
Oh, that's interesting. The narrative point of view. Yeah, I think that sort of gets born out of who the characters are, and what their story is. And I'm not sure I really think consciously about a point of view. I think it's when I say a point of view, I mean, like, I always know whether I'm going to be talking in like third person or first person point of view, but in terms of what the book specifically finds that path on its own.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with you. All right, this next quote is from Neil Gaiman. "Fiction gives us empathy."
It froze for a second, but yeah, you might have to repeat what you just said.
Okay, this is from Neil Gaiman. This is starting to feel like an SAT section on the test. "Fiction gives us empathy. It puts us inside the minds of other people, gives us the gifts of seeing the world through their eyes. Fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over."
Oh my God, I could not agree with that more. That is just absolutely everything that I believe about writing, about novels, about fiction. And listen, I know that there are a lot of people out there who say they think reading fiction is a waste of time. They only want to read nonfiction because they always want to be learning something. But I think that they're missing out on such a huge chunk of humanity by not reading novels. Novels explore humanity on such a deep and profound level. And I think that they make us feel less alone in the world, and they make us understand the world from different points of view. So I think, yeah, fiction is really, really important in terms of understanding ourselves.
To follow up on that,
yeah.
And also, I'm just going to remind everybody who is with us today, please ask your questions in the chat. And as soon as we are done talking with Ellen, we will open it up to your questions. So yeah, with respect to, how much truth comes out of a novel, one of the interesting things being a rom-com writer, a mystery writer, you've crossed a lot of genres, is that the impression is that the only types of books that actually hold truths are literary fiction, the more serious, dramatic stories. And once you write a book that's entertaining and amusing, it's kind of like being the photographer at the Sears photo studio. People love what you're doing, but they don't take it seriously. So, but how do you feel about that in terms of?
I think we're on the same page as this. I think one of the things that people say is, literary fiction is character driven and commercial fiction is story driven. I don't agree with that. I think all fiction is character driven, right?
Yes.
I think that anybody who loves any book, whether it's some very profound and gorgeously written work of literary fiction, or something that's lighter and a fast read,
right,
of commercial fiction, it's the characters that absorb them. They get involved in the character story.
Right.
So I think that character is always king, and which is why I always tell my writing students, no matter where you plan to go in the story, you have to stay true to the character. I get this. I wind up going back and forth a lot with my writing students on this. I always wonder, should I outline a story? How much should I outline? Should I just, sort of wing it? And I explained to them, if you do choose to outline, which I think is a very individual thing, whether you have a formal outline or something sort of loose or something just in your head. A lot of times when we outline carefully, and I do outline carefully, especially with a murder mystery, because there are all these moving parts and they have to fit together so precisely. But when we start writing our books, we don't know our characters as well as we do at the beginning as we do when we get, say, the middle of the book. So you might get to chapter 20 and, you're looking at your outline and you expected your character to behave in a certain way, and you realize the character wouldn't do that. When I wrote the outline, I thought they would, but now that I know them better, I realize that they don't. So my writing students say, what should I do? And I say, always stay true to the character. If the character does something that feels inauthentic to you, it's going to feel inauthentic to the reader. And so what you got to do at that point is go back to the outline and figure out a way to make it work, So
it's true in life. Be true to yourself. Shakespeare said it first, right? To thine own self be true. My last question for you is not about fiction. It's about life.
Okay.
And I just love this quote. Sometimes you find yourself in the middle of chaos, and sometimes in the middle of chaos, you find yourself. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true in life. And I think that's true with our characters as well. Very true with our characters. Yeah, that's a great quote.
That is, we emerge from, from our struggles, as do our characters. And I'm just curious, one last question. Do you ever find that the way that you problem solve for your characters has helped you in life? Have you ever thought, well, one of my characters got away with that one, they did it?
I think it does because, maybe not so much that a specific character has taught me a lesson, but that I always understand that I have to put my characters into great difficulty before they find their way out, because it's when we reach rock bottom that we can change. So I think that it's really taught me that if you find yourself in a really dark place, that's where you're going to find the strength to change and find a way out. So yeah, I think in that sense, being a novelist has taught me things about life.
And I can't think of a better way to end that conversation for all the people who are with us and who are going through transitions and changes and questioning, where are they and why? And you've given us a lot of great insights, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for being a great sport, because I threw things your way that you didn't know were coming, but you were wonderful to listen to.
Saralee, you're always fun. Always.
Thank you. All right. So I guess we're going to turn it over to Debbie now, who's going to read some of the questions in the chat.
All right. Well, we don't have a lot of questions yet, so please, if you have questions.
Listen, people, you can ask about, it doesn't even have to be about a specific book. If you want to ask about publishing or about writing, you could have a question for Saralee too. She's working on a middle grade novel that I'm, just dying to see the latest version of. Saralee's a really talented writer. So when if you're going to the bookstore and you're, going shopping online, look for Saralee Rosenberg as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a question from Chris, who's asking, who are some of your favorite crime or fiction writers?
Well, I think Agatha Christie is like sort of an obvious. I love Susan Isaacs. I mean, she really speaks to me. Laura Littman, I think, is an absolute goddess. Tammy Hogue is quite brilliant. A little bit more in the thriller is Andrew Gross. So Ruth Ware is quite brilliant. Yeah, I could go on. So yeah, there's a lot of exquisite writers out there.
Shiva is saying, found your book to be delightful. So
thank you,
Shiva. Jennifer is asking, are any characters from Love Sold Separately besides Ari and Dana in your next book?
Yes, I thank you for asking. So you know, Megan, actually, if you remember who that character was, that was Dana's best friend and her business manager. So she winds up actually having a little bit of a bigger role in the rooftop party than she had in Love Sold Separately. It was kind of fun because, you know, she got to have a relationship in this book. And of course, you know, I couldn't not, you know, bring Dana's father back. You know, look, when you're writing a book, it's always really fun to have a character that your character has a difficult relationship with, because those scenes are so much fun to write when you have characters who are at odds, you have somebody difficult, you have somebody challenging. It's really fun. I mean, and Dana's father is such a pain in the ass. So he's really fun to write. So I couldn't leave him out of the new book as well. And her sister, Chelsea, is in it, as is her boss, Sherry. So there's, you know, there's also a few new characters. She has a new assistant who I had a lot of fun with. And then there's another woman executive from the company who gets embroiled in the whole thing as well. And of course, the murder victim who I had so much fun shoving off a roof. So thank you for that great question.
Barbara is asking, and by the way, we have people from all over our chapters all over the country. So,
That's great.
yeah, today, which is wonderful that you could do that, you know, with all these virtual programs, which is terrific. Ellen, Barbara is asking, who do you consider your prime audience?
Oh, you know, I'm sorry, who's that? Who asked that, Barbara? That's such a good question. You know, the thing is, Barbara, if you start thinking too much about who's reading your book when you're writing it, it's too many voices to have inside your head. So, you know, I kind of take the advice that J.D. Salinger gave to himself, and this was in one of his books. I think it was Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters and Seymour, an introduction. So if those of you who read those books remember, Buddy Glass was a writer and Seymour was his brother. And he said something to the effect of, you know, Buddy, this next part is so simple, I can't believe I'm saying it, but you simply write the story you most want to read. And I would say that I do that with every single one of my books. I'm writing something that interests me as a reader, and then just hope that other people feel the same way about it, and that I sort of, you know, tap into some zeitgeist with that. And I'll tell you, that's how the Dorothy Parker books wound up coming to be. You know, I was at the time that I got the idea to write the Dorothy Parker book, I was working on the first one. I was working on something else entirely. And I was looking at, and this was, you know, going back several years now, there was a whole slew of books that paid homage to the great writer, another one of my favorites, Jane Austen. I love Jane Austen, still reading, rereading Jane Austen, still getting a lot out of it. But there was just a whole slew of books that paid homage to her in one way or the other, either making her character or taking one of her stories and, you know, doing something, you know, interesting with it in a modern setting. And I was looking at the phenomenon of all those Jane Austen books, and I thought, and I wondered for a minute, why only Jane Austen? Why, you know, why don't other authors get, you know, favorite women authors get this treatment? And I thought, you know, somebody should do that for Dorothy Parker, because I would love to read that. And then I stopped and thought, oh, well, then maybe I should write it, because I was a huge Dorothy Parker fan, and the idea of bringing her back to life as a character in a modern setting excited me so much. I almost couldn't believe nobody had already written that book. My first thing I did was sort of do my research and see if anybody already wrote the book. So yeah, I was writing the book that I really wanted to read, and that excited me at that point. Fortunately, you know, readers really responded to it. And it's the same thing with all of my books. I take something that interests me, because the fact of the matter is, writing a book is hard. It's really hard. So you have to be in love with your subject matter. You know, if you're not in love with your subject matter, you're not going to be able to do it. So, you know, you write the book that you most want to read. You don't write for a particular reader. You don't write for a particular market. You don't chase trends. You know, just find your lane, find what excites you, and you know, hopefully, if you're lucky, then readers will find you too.
So Paula is asking, what kind of surprises did you find with characters while writing this book? And I'll just add, I've heard you say often that sometimes your characters just kind of write themselves.
Yeah, and I know Saralee has had this experience too. I think, you know, what happens is we invent our characters in our heads and we have a backstory and we start to get to know them, and we get to know them so well that when we put them in a scene, we don't really have to invent. It doesn't feel like we're inventing the dialogue. We're just sort of sitting back and listening to them. Saralee, what is your famous line about that?
I'm not the writer, I'm the designated typist. That
Yes.
there are moments in writing, good moments, where the characters are talking and our job is to just shut up and type.
Yeah, so that's definitely what I do, and I'll listen and I'll hear the dialogue, and in fact, you know, it's so vivid to me that sometimes when I go back to edit, I realize that I really need to slow down the pace a little bit and go internal and let the reader know what the character is thinking, because I was hearing it. So I had to write down everything that I heard. So yeah, the characters do tend to really surprise me. And, you know, when I was running these two books, one of the things that kept unfolding to me as I was writing, you know, one of the things, and I'm giving you like a little bit of an inside secret here. One of the most important things about writing a mystery is that every character has a secret. Because if every character has a secret, that's sort of a built-in red herring. You know, you never know if they could be the murderer or involved in the murder in some way. So as I'm writing, I started to like probe the characters for secrets, and sometimes the secrets reveal themselves to me in surprising ways, despite the fact that I thought that I outlined pretty carefully before I began. And when I say I outlined carefully, you know, I just want to explain that, you know, I know where I want my story to begin, and I know what my character wants, and I know whether or not they get it by the end. I also know what arc they're going to have, right? How the main character is going to change by the end. So, you know, it's almost like a matter of steering the ship toward that end. And I usually, when I start, people always say, do you know what the end is? For me, I do. Not every writer does, but I always know, because I think that's so important for, you know, the reader is trusting in you for this journey, and they want to feel like they're delivered to a destination. So when I start, I know what we call it an inciting incident is. I know what my call to action is. I know what the climactic scene is. I know whether the character does or doesn't get what they want. And I know how they grow by the end of the book. So even if I don't outline very carefully, I always have sort of this mental outline of where I'm going to deliver the character and deliver the reader to by the end of the book.
Okay, we're almost out of time. We have one last question here from Shelley. First of all, she said, I love the book. I'm an avid reader, a retired school librarian, and I thought the QVC angle was hysterical. So what made you think of QVC so timely for this year? Absolutely. Shelley.
Yeah, you know, I know that this past year we've all been shopping online like crazy. Right. I did not know that this was going to happen, obviously. But yeah, it's been interesting to have people say, as they've discovered the book, they've discovered online and, you know, and TV shopping. Yeah, trust me, I did not know we were going to wind up in a pandemic and, you know, locked in and not able to visit stores. That was kind of fortuitous. I hope that it, you know, winds up being quaint in another few months when we're all out there in the world and shopping in actual stores.
Right.
But yeah, it was a fun conceit for me to play with and to, you know, imagine that whole world of QVC and invent. For those who haven't read the book, I didn't use QVC and I didn't use HSN. I invented a different shopping channel that doesn't really exist, sort of this like third tier shopping channel, and put it in Manhattan because I just thought it would be sort of fun and exciting to put the book in New York City.
Right.
Okay, well, that takes us to the end of our webinar, and this has just been absolutely delightful. It's
Thank you.
Saralee and Ellen, it's great to see you again.
Yes, you
And
too.
thank you so
Debbie.
much.
Good to see you. Thank you
And-
for having us.
And thank you, everyone who joined us. Everyone
And ask
stay
questions.
safe
Yeah.
and ask questions. We're getting a lot of nice comments. And thank you, everyone. Stay safe and well. And we'll
Yeah.
see you again soon.
Very
Okay.
good. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you, Deb. Thanks, Saralee.
Thanks,
Bye,
Debbie. Thanks,
everybody.
Ellen.
Thank
Bye.
you for your attention. Bye.